Yep.
Okay, I have a question about y'all's various references to the current economic crisis. Neither Bernanke nor Paulson have been employed by Wall Street. And I was just curious to know, I mean,
Well,
no, I'm sorry, let me finish.
okay, sure.
My limited understanding of economics, from what I've been reading, this is a package to basically pay off everybody's mortgages. And again, I don't know, not the bailouts of AIG, I'm talking about the $700 billion. What's going on? Like, why is this a violation of our rights, and why should we be worried?
Well, it's a very good question. First, Paulson was the head of Goldman Sachs, which is a huge banking
I heard
group.
this afternoon that when he retired from Goldman Sachs, he retired with $500 million.
Yes. He's made a lot of money off the stock markets and Goldman Sachs. The bailout is not to bail out the homeowners who have lost their homes. The bailout is not one dime for the homeowners. It's for these big banking corporations who made loans that they knew, they lent money in areas that they knew were questionable, and they were, well, it's an overextension of all the banking systems to the extent that nobody trusts them anymore, including themselves. None of them trust each other because they know they've been lying to each other about the worth of their companies. And the extraordinary boom that you see in the stock market for the last 10 years is based totally on that, which is a superinflation of everybody's ledger sheets, that they were actually lying to themselves and to everybody else about what really they had as reserves to bolster up all of these commitments that they had made. And, you know, one of the interesting things is whether or not, you know, in our daily lives, whether these little plastic cards that we carry around that we call credit cards, I mean, tomorrow they may not work because the bank that you have gotten it from may be one of these banks that is overextended, and while you yourself, your money, should be there, you haven't spent it, you haven't blown it, but because the corporation itself has so overextended itself that your money may not be available to you. And that's what's causing, you know, everybody to be very concerned. What is going to happen? Are we all as individuals going to be just taken down by this whole thing? And if indeed, you know, if there is an adjustment to this to make sure that we know who spent what money, how much each one of them says that their assets are overextended by. I mean, that's one of the things we don't know yet. This $700 billion bailout, there's not a ledger sheet that we can get as the public that says, okay, AIG was overextended this amount. Bear Stearns this amount, that. No, they're just kind of throwing up numbers. And that's why the Congress is rightfully very, very concerned about passing quickly this broad-reaching bill that gives one man, Goldman Sachs, $500 million, who has the background, he knows the skinny on everybody, that he would be the one that will be determining how much would bail Bear Stearns out. And if indeed, since we the people are bailing him out, it's going to be our money. Do we get a share of this somehow? Does the American public, the American government, do we then get a portion of the assets? And if those assets are sold by auction, which is the next phase of this, and in fact the world's wolves are waiting for the auction of America's financial system. And how much are we going to auction this off? And if indeed Mr. King Paulson says, if it's all in his hands, and he says, oh, we'll sell it for this amount, somebody buys it, and then it has to be bought back by somebody else, and it's at inflated terms, who makes all the money on that? I mean, we've seen this sort of system happen numerous times, that the rich get richer from these bailouts.
Before you start, can I add one more thing then? What is the upside of this then? Like, because this has gotten a lot of, I don't want to say positive, but, you know, I mean, not outright condemnations from the media. So is there, I mean, are we going to feel any of this in the economy as a good thing?
No, that nobody's proposing that this is going to make anything better for anyone. It's that there's widespread agreement that it might help prevent things becoming drastically worse, and that if we don't do it, we're going to see millions of people out of work. And so there is a strong argument for doing it, but the question is, how do you do it, and exactly what amount, and who oversees what, and who gets what? And we're being told, this is the one and only plan. It's 3 pages. These are people who take 1,000 pages to name a bridge. This is 3 pages. And we're supposed to hand it over this week, or the sky will fall. And the companies, instead of wanting to see the details and determining whether they must regretfully go into this bailout, are eagerly lining up. They want. That ought to tell you something about the nature of this bailout. And we don't have the money. We don't have $700 billion sitting over here to take. This is our great-grandchildren's money that will be paid back to China, right? To wherever the money comes from, right? So it's not should we spend it on this or something else. We don't have it. We have been pleading for decades for a few pennies, for schools, for mass transit, for clean energy. And we don't have it. It's not there. Sorry. Cupboard's bare. Now, some bankers are involved, and immediately there's $700 billion, no problem. It's there. This ought to concern us. And there's a section in the 3-page proposal, I think it's Article 8 or Section 8, it's a couple of sentences that says, the Secretary of the Treasury shall have absolute control over this money, shall be liable to no court rulings, no court processes, no agency oversight whatsoever. So the Constitution gave Congress the exclusive right to raise and spend every dime, because they are the representatives of us. They are closer to us than one single president representing the whole country or Halliburton. And this takes that away. This takes as much money as we spend in a year on everything and hands it to one guy from Goldman Sachs, appointed by a president, and outside of all oversight. It's not just that he's going to spend it. We don't get to know why he spends it, where he spends it, how he spends it, what happens to it. This is giving a fortune that we don't even have to dictatorial power of one person. And I would just add quickly that, you know, a lot of people I really respect are proposing, well, if we must do this, let's have the public own shares in these companies, and then if they make any money, we get a profit. I'm not sure I want that. I mean, I like owning public parks, I like owning the public facilities, but do we want to own these companies, and then the next time they fail, we're absolutely bound to bail them out again? You know, I would rather tax the hell out of them. I would rather have a maximum income that's 10% the minimum income. And if anybody wants to make more of that, they got to raise the minimum wage. Because you cannot have a democracy and people with this much money. Doesn't work.
Let me add one thing. The last big bailout we had, the President of the United States' brother was the recipient of one of these bailouts. It's called Silverado. And Neil Bush was part of the Silverado's savings and loan, and he had a huge bailout on that, as did Mr. Keating, and 5 U.S. senators were under ethics charges for trying to protect Mr. Keating, and one of them was Senator John McCain.
And don't forget, international banks are starting to line up too.
That's right.
So what are our alternatives? What else can we do?
On this economic thing? Well, for sure, call your congressmen and senators tomorrow. When I was sitting in that hearing today, one of the senators said to King Henry and to Bernanke, he said, We have had thousands of phone calls into my office, and not one person says that we ought to be giving you guys $700 million. Nobody trusts you, nobody believes you. So one of the things is call them with your opinion on what ought to happen. That we need to look further at the proposal, that there needs to be, I mean, actually you don't need to say much, just say, don't do the $500 or $700 billion, don't rush to that. We're concerned about it.
And I think she's also asking, okay, go ahead. I think she's also asking what are the alternatives to the plan to fork over $700 billion to Paulson.
I'm fair we all agree that it can't go to this one guy with no oversight, no control whatsoever. I mean, that's unacceptable. But how else are we going to buoy our economy back up to what it ought to be, what it is, so I can get a job next year?
We can put money into the banks, but with complete congressional oversight, with strict limitations on compensation for the top executives so that we're not rewarding them, with firing, with no pensions, the chief executives responsible for the frauds. We can impose extensive
regulation on banking.
We can put back the regulations that were taken out under Clinton. We can put in new regulations. We can split up so that the industry, so that these different financial industries can't mix the way that they can now with such detrimental effects. There are lots of groups and experts who have drawn up alternatives for here's how we could do this in a fair and responsible way. And if you go to afterdowningstreet.org, right at the top, I have a link to a good list of proposals. And it has to include limiting the rewards to these people and taxing the income that so many people are making for what really should not count as work. Absolutely destructive levels of income. You cannot. It's not that I don't want somebody to have that fifth yacht. It's I'm happy for their happiness, but you cannot have a democracy with that level of wealth in those few hands. It doesn't work because of the power that's wielded that brings you proposals like this one.
Yes, can you say something else about stealing of the elections? Because I mean, I totally agree, and I'm so scared that this is going to happen because I believe from my own reading and research, they stole 2000 and 2004. So I believe it's perfectly logical and horrific that the next one will be stolen. However, what are some other things that we are to do? Because if the best we can do is get other people aware of it, to get the word out, and wherever we have contacts at, local voting places, what else can we do? And it is so important because I think it's part of the essence of everything, this complete power that's been taken over in the last 8 years. I mean, completely. Not that Clinton was totally innocent, but this complete, I see it as just a fascist corporate state now. I mean, I think we're there. It's not coming. I believe we're there. We study history at all and the parallels. We're there. So what do all of us do?
Well, the main ways in which it will be stolen are electronic machine fraud and voter suppression. And the voter suppression is happening right now. And so when you see an abuse, like was seen down in the county where Virginia Tech is located, where the registrar puts out this statement that, if you try to vote where you live as a student, your parents can no longer deduct you on their income tax and you'll be fined for this and you'll, pretty much end up in jail. And to scare all the students away from voting in a swing state. Question it, challenge it, organize protests, contact the media, demand that the truth that these myths are myths be exposed and put out there. I mean, fight every little instance like that, and push the candidates to get on top of the issues. The best sources of information I can recommend are Brad blog, which is run by a friend of ours named Brad, bradblog.com, and Velvet Revolution, which does not refer to the revolution in Czechoslovakia, but to what's happening here now. velvetrevolution.us is the website. And they actually have a lawsuit happening in Ohio right now where they're deposing key players in the 2004 fraud that has the potential to have a big impact. But, you know, in Virginia, you can vote on paper. Well, it depends where you are. In some places, you will vote on paper, but in Charlottesville, you vote on a DRE, on a direct recording electronic machine, where you can have any number of witnesses, and there's just no way to witness how your vote is counted because it happens inside a box, and it's private property of a corporation. But you can vote on paper if you vote absentee. Now, I went actually today to the registrar's office in Charlottesville and asked, can I vote absentee? And they said, well, you have to have a reason. It has to be one of these reasons. And I said, well, I'd be lying if I said I had one of these reasons, but I'll see if I can figure out a way to be out of town on election day, and then I'll come back here next week and I'll vote absentee. No guarantee, but at least you're voting on a piece of paper and handing it to a person, and you have some idea of what's happening to your vote. But the main thing we have to do is get people ready. Reach out to organizations and individuals and groups and get them ready to insist on resisting if it looks like it was stolen.
Just to be sure we don't miss any of the issues, I gotta respond to that too. Several years ago, I was very instrumental in jurisdictions acquiring DRE machines. The reason was that I was a disability rights advocate, and we went through a great deal to be assured that the process would not be tampered with. But there is no other way that some people with disabilities can vote in private. What they told us at the time when we said, what about the paper trail? It's a computer, lady. I can hook a printer on it any day of the week. Well, it's probably true that they could do that. It's also probably true that as new machines are purchased, and they are just computers, folks. There's no rocket science to this. They're just computers. But you need to be able to take a piece of paper out that says how you have voted, and there needs to be the other stub of it in a box so that if we have to have a recount, we know whether that machine counted right or wrong. But please think about requiring paper ballots, because many, many people in our country are disenfranchised by paper ballots.
Let me say, one thing as a person who spent many, many years in the computer industry from the very beginning, there's a very easy way to program these computers that have no paper trail, and what you do is you program them to undervote in the way that you want them to. And I participated not long ago in a recount. Well, the recount was exactly the same as the original count, but the undervote was phenomenal. We said, well, wait a minute, how come people would vote for 4 and then not vote for the 5th thing? Because you can program them to do an undervote, and it looks perfectly all right. There's no way to trace it, and the way that you say about it is, oh, well, they only wanted to vote for 3 people, not 5 people. You can program in an undervote, and I tried to explain this to the people at the county, and they, oh, it's not possible, we can't do that. These are perfectly good machines, they're good computers. Well, it doesn't matter, the programmer can program it, and if you program in an undervote and you know how to do it, you can make it do anything you want. I'm telling you that as a computer expert from many years.
Let me take her, 'cause